how many of you have been involved in doing butterfly transactions? Anybody? Okay. A lot of us tend to avoid subjects where we're not as comfortable. That's human nature, I think. Is that a safe assumption? All right. So I promise you, in the next 10 minutes, you will no longer find it mystifying. Okay? If I'm wrong, then I don't know. I'll figure out how to make it right. Don will explain it to you.
So OpCo lending the money to Cisco, or you're butterflying the loan. It means you're transferring it.
Yeah.
It's not in OpCo's assets at all.
No, won't be anymore.
No.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to sneak back over here and push the next slide. So 55.2 is the anti-avoidance rules, right?
Yeah.
55.3 is the exceptions to the anti-avoidance rules. Where 55.3 applies, 55.2 does not. Simple as that. Right? So 55.3 states that, and there are some restrictions as far as related parties, okay, but I want to just talk about how this all works. So I'm going to say there's 4 easy steps to a single-wing butterfly. You realize that a single-wing butterfly, 55.3, is where there's no unrelated individuals. 55.3b is what you do for unrelated individuals. It doesn't work if you have unrelated individuals. By the way, what does it say about siblings in 55.5? For purposes of Section 55 of the Income Tax Act, what does it say about siblings, adult or otherwise?
You mean whether you're related or not?
Mm-hmm.
That you're related.
Brothers and sisters are not related. They're deemed to be not related.
Precisely. So you got to be really careful of this. You don't want to be caught in doing this where you have siblings, because it doesn't work. All right? That's the first thing to remember.
So, sorry, a single-wing butterfly works when you have related individuals.
Correct.
Okay.
Other than siblings. And you have to always be aware of 74.4 corporate attribution rules as well, for siblings and minor children and things like that. In any reorganization, you got to watch that.
But if they're like jointly owned in the same way, that would still be okay.
Yeah, like say it's husband and wife, right? So typically what we'll do if we're butterflying money from company A to company B, and say as an example, we have an oddball, all right, 70-30 ownership in one company, 50-50 in the other. Well, if there's no value, we'll just do a share purchase agreement and cause both companies to be 50-50 by each one, just to avoid corporate attribution. In other words, if you have a situation where you have 50-50 in one company, you got another company with 70-30, you move it over, well, one of the spouses just ended up with a whole bunch of money that he had no entitlement to. It's going to be taxed on it now. So these are just little traps, right? Just little things. But they can make a big difference in tax planning. Make sure that you're protected, your clients are protected, you're thinking of all these different things.
So what section or subsection applies to this single-wing butterfly?
This is
55.3b.
55.3a.
3a.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, okay, so in a real straightforward way, like what we're going to do is we're going to create most likely shares that don't exist. We look at the minute book, okay? We'd say, what are the attributes of the shares they have? And what we want to create is what's called high-low shares, okay? And high-low shares basically have a high redemption value but a low puck for stated capital. So say they have $1 million sitting over here in OpCo, okay? So we might create, I don't know, to make the math easy, like 10 shares that have a redemption value of $100,000 each, but a puck or stated capital of, say, $1 each. So what do you pay the tax on, the million or the $10? No. No, $10. No tax. So we would normally have to amend the articles of incorporation of the operating company to create high-low shares, all right? And these shares, again, they're high redemption, $1 million. You don't have to do a valuation, by the way. There's $1 million sitting here, no valuation needed. We know how much we want to move. And if you have a loan, you can lump it in too. So we cause these shares, we create the shares, $1 million redemption value, $10 stated capital or PUC, and there's no tax on issuing them to a shareholder. Okay, so the first thing is, how are you going to get the shareholder into this guy's shares into this guy's hands? You can see that John has special high lows, right? But how do you give him the shares? Any ideas on how to create them? Now they exist, right? Because you amend the articles. But then how do you put it into his hands? Any ideas?
Pays $10.
Yeah, it's
You could. Typically what we'll do is we'll do maybe an 86, or maybe, probably not 86, 51. So 51 conversion. So what's the difference of an 86 and a 51 as far as the treatment or the methodology or the mechanism of 51 versus an 86? Okay, so 51 is, most accountants like to do 86s.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to say everything that you do with 86 you do with 51, except for you can convert some of the shares. Right? So we create, that's basically how we would do that. We'd probably exchange some of his shares. Say he's got 100 shares. We exchange maybe 50 of them for the special high-low shares. Or a real easy way to do it, and sometimes to avoid corporate attribution rules at 74.4, we pay a stock dividend, because stock dividends are not subject to corporate attribution rules, right? So in other words, what we'll do to get the shares into his hands, we just pay up a stock dividend, which is real easy.
Repeat that, so exchange, so normally it would take place 86, if you do a reorg through 86, you have to exchange all the shares. But you can do a 50, if you apply 55-1 to the transaction, you only have to exchange some of them.
Oh, no, just 51, not 55-1, 51, 51.
51.
Yeah, it's for a partial share conversion, right?
Right.
So a real easy thing to do, like I said, is just simply pay a stock dividend to the guy. We do the resolution, we issue the dividend, we're done. Anyway, the bottom line is we get the shares into his hands. Like, I just want you to completely get it, right? Like, there's ways that you can get the shares into the guy's hands. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
All right? So these shares have a redemption value of how much? $1 million, right? So what you do then, you just do a simple 85. Okay? You take the shares that have been created, that are in the shareholders' hands, and you're going to roll them over to Cisco, and you're going to take back the same kind of share in Cisco. Simple 85. It doesn't get more simple than that. It's a rollover, right? John takes his shares, he rolls them over to Cisco, he takes back the same kind of shares. And there's only 2 more steps left. Well, actually 1, but it's kind of 2, right? So what you do then is you're going to redeem the shares. Now, Section 55.3A states that there is no issue with 55.2, remember I said 55.3, where 55.3A applies, 55.2 does not apply. 55.3A states that when a dividend is paid in respect of a share redemption, then it's a 55.3A issue, provided there's no unrelated people. Basically, I'm making it a bit more tedious than I said I would, but you're going to redeem the shares. You're going to depend on 55.3A. You're going to redeem the shares. You're bringing them back, and you're paying out the $1 million. The $1 million comes out, cash, the investments, all that gets paid. The shares come back. So just to cover it again, articles of amendment to create high-low shares. We issue the dividend to John. He takes the shares. He does an 85 rollover to Cisco, takes back the same kind of shares. He redeems the shares back and pays for it with the cash. It's done. Not that complicated. It's really not. Like the people that do a lot of this sort of work would prefer it to look like outside of, what you'll ever understand, right? And we don't like that. We prefer to be kind of like, let's make it real easy, take the mystery out of it. And if it's hard to understand, how do you recommend it, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
So there's no tax until the shareholder actually redeems the shares.
Right. Well, no, he redeems the shares. So you're basically, what you're basically doing is exchanging value for value. You're redeeming the shares that have a redemption value of $1 million for $1 million cash. So the $1 million goes out to redeem the shares.
But it goes to OpCo.
Cisco. Money's sitting in OpCo now, right?
The individual shareholder never took anything.
No.
When he takes the shares,
Shareholders, it's all stayed in the corporation.
it's all stayed in the corporation.
Yeah.
Corporate, it's an intercorporate dividend going up to Cisco,
Yeah.
so that's why it's taxable.
Yeah, yeah, that's precisely. Think of it like this, please.
I'm sorry, the shares are redeemable, are they non-voting, the high shares?
Yeah, they're non-voting shares.
Definitely not.
Yeah. So all you're really doing is, for a brief moment in time, this Cisco owns the shares of OpCo, just for a brief moment. And then you redeem them, and it's done. Does that make sense? And anyway, it's on the slide, so,
It's on the slide, yeah.
yeah. All right?
So amend articles to create HILO shares.
Only
Issue
'cause people don't
issue the
set-
shares.
Only because people set them up, so like when they first start, set the corporation up, we set nothing but common shares up when
Yeah,
we started the
yeah.
corporation.
Mm-hmm.
50 years.
And
Stock
preferred.
dividend,
Mm-hmm.
85 rollover,
Mm-hmm.
redeem the shares.
The cash used for redeeming the shares, that's all. No tax in any of those transactions. And it's a statutory provision. So it's something you can depend on.
Right.
And it's not really like, there's nothing unusual or risky or anything like that. It's just, I think, a very important planning tool that you want to use to resolve what appears to be like a rather innocuous situation until CRA comes knocking.
We should get all the agreements that says this happened at 9 o'clock this
Yes,
morning, and
yeah.
then this happened, next step happens at
9:01,
9:01, and then
yeah.
the next step happens at 9:01, because it has to happen in sequence, right? They can't have to happen in sequence.
Chief Justice Bowman, if I might just ask you if you remember a comment that you made about things happening in a brief moment of time?
Did I say that?
I think so. Something it was about GAR, as I recall.
Yeah, I think it was.
How would you express that? How did you express it? By the way, it's a moment of
Darn if I
genius
can
here.
remember. It happened simultaneously almost.
Yeah, as I recall it, your comment was based on a sequence of events causing to be taken as a transaction.
Yes.
Does that
Yes,
ring a bell?
I remember that case.
Yeah. And how do you explain the theory that life all happens simultaneously or something like that?
I
Is that-
don't know the answer to that, but
How do you justify
I do know
GAR?
that it looks a little suspicious if the same event or a series of events all happen simultaneously.
Yeah, yeah. I found it kind of comical. The concept is that GAR has it that, you know, if you have all these sequence of transactions that take place, they're lumped together. Well, one theory is life is all taking place and things happening all simultaneously at one moment. How do they justify GAR if that's the case? So I thought it was kind of comical.